This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Welcome to today's Talk Business and Politics Daily. I'm Roby Brock, joined by John Brummett, columnist for the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. How many years have you been writing columns?
I began in February of 1986, so that's 33 years.
Wow.
A 33-year conversation.
Is that 33 years or 43 years?
33.
Okay. I'm just making sure.
Are you just trying to trick me?
Oh, it's just seeing how good your math skills
Well, it's pretty
are.
good, wasn't it?
It was.
33 and 33 years of conversation with the readers of the Arkansas statewide newspaper, 3 to 5 times a week.
It's been a tough way to make a living, hasn't it been?
I have made a decent, comfortable living for 50 years, counting my pre-columnizing days, in a dying industry. Think about that. That's like a magic trick.
You're the coal miner of journalism. How about that?
Well, okay, whatever. Somehow I think you're trying to demean me, but maybe
I'm
not.
not. No, I'm not.
Coal miners are great. We need them.
I know. They're making America great again.
Right.
Let's begin with your column on Sunday. You wrote about Elizabeth Warren and how you have been kind of accused of gender bias because you were not talking about Elizabeth Warren when you were talking about some of the top-tier Democratic candidates that are out there running for president. You mentioned Biden and Bernie and Buttigieg.
Very good.
Thank you. That is very much. What should constitute being in the conversation at this point when there's 20-something candidates running for the Democratic nomination? Aren't they all kind of in the conversation right now?
Well, not really. I just saw a poll by Washington Post and ABC News that of the candidates, and Biden is ahead at 13%. Sanders is second at 9%. Buttigieg is at 5%. Kamala Harris 4%. Beto at 3%. 13 of the 20 don't scratch. They're 0. I don't know that you're in the conversation or need to be if you, at this point, you can't even distinguish yourself. Guess who got 1% in that poll of Democratic voters? Trump.
Trump got 1%.
So you got 13 of these 20 who can't beat Trump in a Democratic primary. Because, you know, there was an open-ended question and you got some yahoos out there who say, I'm a Democrat and I'm for Trump, which there may actually be Democrats for Trump. So what puts you in the conversation is that at this point you distinguish yourself in some way, that you show that you've got something to offer. I haven't seen anything. I previously said Biden because he's Biden, Bernie because he's been there and he's the insurgent outsider and there's a premium on that, and Buttigieg was just smart and having a new conversation that appealed to upper class white liberals and had making a generational change and had sort of dwarfed Beto O'Rourke. But it turns out that if you really look at Elizabeth Warren, you talk about some serious policy, as progressive and bold as anything, more than what Bernie's saying.
And someone brought this to your attention that you seem to be singling out the men and not the women. So explain that.
Well, I lead this class of seniors every week, and you're going to do some program for them this summer. And you're familiar with the organization. You've subbed for me over there. It's a wonderful experience.
They always ask me to come back.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
No, they don't. They may after that. I've told them every columnist in the country ought to stand up once a week before 300 people and account for himself. I think it's good for me. And
I'm like Prime Minister's questions.
And I'm talking about Biden and about Sanders and Buttigieg, and a man in the audience said, "Why are none of the women getting mentioned?" And I said, "It's because of the things I just mentioned. Biden is a front runner." With a connection to the working class voters of the states that Hillary couldn't win. Sanders is the outsider insurgent with all this money, and Buttigieg is connecting, and none of the others are. It turned out that actually, then I saw a CNN town hall in which Elizabeth Warren was impressive with the depth and boldness of her policy proposals. And I asked the class, I hadn't really mentioned her or thought about her. And in fact, she's polling low. Is that because I subconsciously have some sort of, I diminish a woman candidate? And is it subconsciously maybe that a lot of people do for the reason that she's not showing up well in the polls? And I got a chorus of yes from women in the audience. So that's what I wrote about, sort of an account to the readers, introspection, that sort of thing. This whole gender concept, you know, where an old Arkansas man of 65 years trying to adapt his sensibilities or modernize his sensibilities, it's been a challenge for me because I get caught doing things. You've had to correct me a few times. I'll just refer to men, you know, and you'll say, oh, there are women
those
running
co-eds.
too.
I remember when we talked about those co-eds.
Yeah, which I thought was just a word. Even yesterday, on the very day I wrote in the column about using the word shriek for Hillary and getting in trouble over that, and having some insensitivity, somebody was reading my column for Tuesday in which I used the word strident. And this person said, listen, if you had ever dealt with a HR director, you would know that word does not get used anymore. To me, it was a perfect word for not the females I was talking about, but for everybody I was talking about. But it's all a cultural struggle that we're having. And I decided to just have it out in the open for myself and connect with readers, which is what I'm supposed to do.
You know what I like about you? You're an old dog that can be taught new tricks.
You've seen me on the Twitter?
Yeah.
You've seen me hooking up these Amazon Fire Sticks to my TV?
I'm ready for you to get on Snapchat. When you get on Snapchat or get you a TikTok account, I'm going to be real impressed.
Okay. I don't even know what a TikTok account is, so I'm going to be on it by this afternoon. I'll be there because I'm determined. I am determined to try to keep up because the thing about growing old, I don't want to get too philosophical, you realize that most of the people you're dealing with have a frame of reference that's not like yours. And there are people, newspapers? Are you kidding? What's that? You know, so I try to adapt myself to the changing, and you help me do that with a digital broadcast.
I'm impressed.
Okay. Too much information for you?
No, it's good.
Okay.
Do you have a pick yet in the Democratic field, assuming that you're not voting for Trump? I don't know, you may be, so correct me if I'm wrong, but do you have someone, are you in a wait and see mode?
Well, I'm going to wait and see because, you know, at this point in most elections, it was entirely different from the way it turned out. At this point in the Republican primary of 2008, Rudy Giuliani was ahead. At this point in the Democratic primary of 2004, Howard Dean was ahead. Things happen. People collapse. But I think I'm going to look most seriously now at Biden because he may be the electable one. And he's okay, kind of weird, but okay. Buttigieg, because he's so smart in generational change. And Elizabeth Warren, because she's Bernie without the socialist label or the crazy hair. You know, and I've got to think about, it's not just me. A lot of guys my age, they say, I cannot stand to listen to Elizabeth Warren talk. They say that just like, I just can't. Is this a cultural, gender-based aversion? If she was saying the same thing with the same inflection in a male's baritone, would it seem different? These are the kinds of things that I struggle about. But those three interest me most right now.
All right, we'll keep running tab on that. We may come back to this in a few weeks or a few months.
Okay.
Arkansas Democrats will get an earlier say in the Democratic primary because the state legislature moved up the primaries to March of 2020. That is one of several things that they did in this legislative session, which ended last week.
Oh, this is your segue.
I wanted to get you to, this is your segue.
Well, you always work up these clever segues. Go ahead.
Well,
I didn't mean to interrupt your beautiful segue.
Do you, what are your highlights and lowlights from the session? Let's start with what do you think was the major accomplishments of this session?
The major accomplishment of the session is that it imposed Asa Hutchinson's reform agenda. It's a reform agenda I mostly don't like, but it was imposed. It changes the state. It's a state that now has a different, I think more regressive tax structure, but that's what he wants.
So you were opposed to teacher pay increases and a highway plan and transformation of state government?
No. The taxes is what I'm talking about right now. Most of which I opposed. Maybe you're right, though. Maybe I didn't. Maybe 3 of the 4 actually are for. Reorganizing state government, perfect.
That's a super majority that you're approving of.
Right. And teacher pay, I'd like to, you know, Jared Henderson had a plan. He was this little-known person who ran for governor on the Democratic ticket against Hutchinson and got a few votes. He had a much bolder plan for really for reaching out to the future and saying, we're going to value teaching more. ACE's teacher thing is incremental, but you can't be against raising teacher pay. But I think the major accomplishment is that it changed the philosophical arc of the state. We are now into sort of an era, he called it transformation for a reason, launched by this governor. And he's doing something that sort of ends the previous era, which was a Clinton bumpers prior Huckabee, BB era. Huckabee, in fact, didn't Republicanize or conservatize. So that was the major accomplishment.
Mm-hmm. I will limit you to one thing that you may pick as a low light of the session. So what do you think was the most egregious thing that this legislature did?
One thing?
You can fumble around a few, but then settle on one, yeah.
No. Look.
You love a challenge, don't you?
I may be able to parlay this into...
This isn't a constitutional amendment where you get to roll 4 into 1.
Well, that would be thrown out by the Supreme Court if I did that. I'll just set the scene. A progressive African-American state legislator, fresh from being the campaign manager, I think, for Frank Scott and a bold transformational change in Little Rock, proposes very simply that one of the 4 stars on the state flag no longer represent the Confederacy or implicitly the Jim Crow era, which is when it was put on there and designated as such, and commemorate Native Americans. Takes it to a committee, some big tough sons of the Confederacy complain, and a 20-member committee can only get 5 Democratic votes. 6 or 7 against. The rest of these guys take a walk. To me, at that moment, 15 state legislators on a contemporary 20-member committee had just taken a walk for slavery. To me, I know that people object to making it that simple, but that's what it meant to me. I thought it was a horrible moment. Now, I am persuaded that your fine guest of yesterday, Andy Davis,
yes,
had other ideas, more long-term. He talks about a crock pot issue. I say in the paper tomorrow, it ought to be a microwave issue. You put it in there and punch 20 seconds and zap it. But he wants to cook it slow. And he says that, and I'm working, he and I are talking on the phone about these 4 concepts that all the stars would represent. I'm convinced that he voted no because he thought it was all too quick and it needed more context. I believe that's right. If so, I have seen effective legislators during committee meetings over the years go down to Charles Blake and say, they're not ready to do this today. Let's pull it down and you and I will work this session to get this done. So that's 2 things. One, what happened, and then what didn't happen. That you know, let's not go through a session with left hanging that we honor slavery or rebellion when the governor is now is in favor of the bill. I thought that was the low light of the session. There were many low lights of the session.
That is column fodder for you for the next several weeks.
Guess what I'm writing about tomorrow? The 4 things.
How are you?
Yeah, I was cleaning off, this is something you don't want to know, but I'm going to burden you with it anyway. I was hosing down the front porch because of the pollen, moving heavy furniture down to the lawn so I could do it. With my phone in my pocket, I inadvertently placed a call. You know, a pocket call?
Oh, yeah.
To Andy Davis. And he said, did you mean to call me? And I said, with hose in one hand and phone, no. He said, I'm switching from, I'm thinking about culture instead of heritage. One of his 4 things was heritage. Some had objected to heritage. And so while I'm doing the seasonal pollen removal, I'm having a discussion. And I think the state can brainstorm now for 2 years and come up with 4 themes or principles or identifiers of the state that would be better for our flag. It will all, the stew that will cook in the crock pot will be better, which doesn't mean we shouldn't have microwaved that 1 star when we had the chance. Okay?
Yes.
Those metaphors work for you?
Those were great.
All right.
You should be in charge of segues from now on.
Your
those
segues
were really
excellent.
well.
I'm sorry I called attention to your segue.
It's our meal is over. It's time for dessert.
Right.
Thank you for being here.
You bet.
All right. That is all for today's Talk Business and Politics. He is John Brummett. You can catch him 3 days a week in the newspaper, at the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, a fourth time online at arkansasonline.com. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you next time.
You'll find us at the end of a lot of long country roads, covering over 60% of the great state of Arkansas. Our 17 electric distribution cooperatives are working day and night to provide reliable, affordable power to over 500,000 homes, farms, and businesses, just like yours. The Electric Cooperatives of Arkansas, your local energy partners.
Each day, the promise of our nation begins again. Arkansas and America moving forward. I help make that promise a reality. It's not for everyone, but people everywhere depend on us.
Oh, I love you too, sweetie.
Trucking delivers, or everything stops. And that's what drives me.